So we're doing the project planning for the OVSDB network project. And we've got kind of a slide. We've got a long list of features. And that list is actually kind of fluid still right now. So we'll go through those slides, kind of describe the features that we're looking at. We can go through some high-level discussions, and then maybe if there's extra features, people have other ideas, other requests that they want to put into the project. We'd like to talk about that. I'm Sam Hague. I'm a cat herder for the OVSDB NetVirt project.
We have cats? Come on.
We got bad cats. Yeah. Yeah, so like I said, we've got a list of features. What I like to get out of the meeting is, or at least out of this session, is it's a pretty large list. We'd like to prioritize them, at least start that discussion. We're trying to figure out which features we really need. And the second part of that is I'm sure you've heard this, it's open source. So we're always looking for involvement, contributions from anybody that wants to get involved. In general, I think the OVSDB project has been one of the more, I don't know, it's kind of like a springboard within OpenDaylight. A lot of features, a lot of developers come through here. I think our community is pretty open and very helpful to get other, to bring people on board to OpenDaylight. So that'd be the second piece that we're trying to get out of this session, is at least try to get people interested, come work on the project. Just kind of the cast list, all the features. There's a bunch of different features, and you can see this is a good reference. You can see the people's names, and you can see kind of the areas that they kind of want to work on, or that they're kind of driving. So this is a pretty good list. If you're interested in one of these areas, these are the guys to kind of reach out to. These are the experts. Planning references. So our project, we use Trello, just like a lot of the OpenDaylight projects. That's what that first link is. The OVSDB Boron, that's our project. That's where we're tracking things. Right now, there's just one feature in there, or one task in there, and it's the release planning feature or task. If you want to get on that board, just send an email to me, and we'll get you access to the board. You can see all the features. And then the planning spreadsheet. That's actually, if you get on that board, you'll see on the one task, there's a link to that spreadsheet. And it's kind of just it's just a Google spreadsheet where we're just listing all the features, just a simple description, and who's requesting them, and possibly if you're interested in working on those areas. Okay. So here's the tentative list right now. And you can see some of these have asterisks beside them. And we've got slides for every one of these. There's probably at least one or two slides for every one of these, and they kind of give a high-level description, and we'll go through those. The ones with the asterisks, those are features which there's separate sessions that are here at the forum. Like Andre did just prior to this one, did the NetVirt Rearchitecture. And so, we can try to quickly walk through those ones, I guess, and then so we can save more time for the other stuff. Okay, so that's the quick one. For everybody that wasn't here, that's the NetVirt Rearchitecture. Do you want to do another spin on it, or? Yeah. So, so the main idea is, though, I'll just do a quick one since Andre, half the people are here.
You want me to?
Come on, man.
So it's basically right now the NetVirt. We're looking at possibly breaking the NetVirt piece out of OVSDB NetVirt. So just to step back, OVSDB NetVirt has really two kind of different components. One is the Southbound that actually gets used by a lot of different applications, and the NetVirt provider that implements the new OpenStack, the Neutron API, and it uses both the Southbound and the OpenFlow plugin. So this rearchitecture is to take this NetVirt provider and kind of split it up, make it more modular, so we can pull in layer 2 gateway support and eventually lots of other stuff. So that's on the next slide. That's a picture of blowing this up, well-defined API, MD cell-based API, and northbound and southbound renderers to
Yeah, yeah. And this is actually another good place, you know, for people that are coming new to the project and things like that. You know, there's a lot of existing code that's already there, and it's going to be repartitioned out, you know, kind of re-architected, you know, to be all driven through the, like Andre was saying, through the MD-SAL, the NetVirt model. But it's a good place. Again, there's a lot of code that's already there, and it's pretty easy to understand, and there'll be a lot of help, you know, to guide you through that if you want to get involved. Okay. Reconciliation. Yeah, man.
We didn't know we were going to be speaking here.
I told you guys.
So, if you want to get in the mic?
Yeah, good mic.
So obviously the reconciliation part of it. So, hello. Now it's working. No? Okay. So reconciliation, I think, you know, today's discussion with the Newton northbound, and I talked to many other folks, this seems to be another, you know, pain point for some of the folks. I was just talking to Srini, and he was kind of explaining some of the issues there. So reconciliation, we try to deal it with a certain level, but given the timeline and a bandwidth, we actually skip few of the stuff which we are planning to do in this release. So first thing is in controller restart is, we handle few of the scenarios there, you know. But when you kind of talk to a devices where the devices also provide a different mode of connection, then you kind of lot of, you know, permutation, combination come into picture, and you need to handle them, you know, case by case basis. So what if the one of the major problem which we faced is, what about, you know, the connection? OVSDB provide two type of connection. You can connect to a device, or device can connect to the controller. Okay. So the basic use case that we can see is, okay, if controller need to connect to the device, and what if device is not there? Right? So you need, how long you're going to wait for it, right? But the configuration exists in your config data store, so you try to reconcile it. So that is one of the issues which we are facing, you know. It's just that these are all problem statement as of now, and we need to work on a solution, you know, where we can say, if somebody has already dealt with this problem, we are happy to take any patch which, you know, or any suggestion on how to kind of handle it in the best way. Second problem is, what should be the contract with the application for these kind of scenarios? So as of now, the general contracted, if you want to configure any device, you need to go to operational data store and see whether the device is there or not. If device is there, you can configure it. That's a very simple contract. If the device disconnects, application need to take care of any of the cleanup related to the, you know, to that device. So they need to go to config data store and delete the configuration. Okay. So as of now, much of the work is left to the, you know, application side. But we have seen that there are requests where, you know, they actually want these things to be in a way that they gave some valid scenarios, in the sense that you have a config in a config data store, and device kind of disconnect for a second, it connects it back, right? So you don't really want application to do the whole cleanup and everything. So they says, okay, we'll keep the configuration in it. If device connects it back, just, you know, reconcile it. Okay. So we are trying to deal some of these scenarios. Second one is a switch initiated connection. So this is another mechanism where you can connect your device to the controller. So you connect, but that connection is triggered manually. Somebody go and set the manager, it connects to the controller, and then you basically put some configuration on it. Now the problem here is this configuration of bridges, port you create on that, that's going to be in a config data store. But because it was a switch initiated connection, you can't really do much here, because you have to wait for a, you know, switch to connect back. Now that is another level of reconciliation. We thought of doing it in a Beryllium, but kind of, you know, because of the bandwidth restriction, we were not able to do it. And this is something which we are planning to do it in a, you know, Boron release. Switch reconnects. That is, you know, reconnects is the broader sense. You know, we are trying to handle the connection flapping. So it's basically comes into the same bracket of, you know, switch initiated connection, how to do the reconciliation. At a high level, we say, basically we are kind of still working on these things. What kind of contract application actually look for, right? So some applications say, I'll take control of it, and some says, you know, okay, you do all those things, and I want to do the minimum work. So this is something which we'll be discussing, you know, in this release, and we'll probably taking some decision on that, you know, implementing some of the logic there. And you know, the outcome is basically what we want to come up with a clear application contract, because we thought it's a clear, but it's not really that clear for the application to how to handle certain scenarios. So which we'll try to address in this release.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it's Nil's last point there. That's the important one. Now's the time to give us a request. I mean, because like there's a lot of different conditions and scenarios. So now's the time, though, to tell us
Yeah.
what you need handled.
Because
So
based,
when you say switch reconnects, you also include the controller restart, the switch restart, everything under that umbrella?
no, yeah, so controller restart is one thing. When controller comes up, right,
Yeah.
it actually try to do all the configuration. Now, switch reconnected, one of the scenario, controller is up and it has some configuration, but switch basically didn't connect, but it will connect after some time, right? Switch reconnected, just disconnected connects, drill down to the same scenario, but in both the scenarios, you can hit the same situation.
Right.
This is what, yeah.
So I described to Anil and Vishal before. So one of the issues that we have seen, if the device initiates the connection, and for some reason the connection flaps, so application is trying to push the config to the device, and then there is a thread in the library that's basically doing a synchronous call, and that thread keeps waiting again forever. I mean, until you basically reboot the controller. So I mean, that's one of the
Even when the device connects back?
yes, yeah.
So that will create another thread. It's like, so internally.
It's a whole new connection because of the connection.
Because
Yeah.
we generally don't want any synchronous operation there. Okay, so we just wanted to hand over everything to NATI and it goes out of TCP channel and that's it. We don't really want to block anything at southbound level, right? So we want it to be pretty much asynchronous manner. Right, so we are not really waiting for any RPC, or we don't really provide any RPC which user can call and wait for a response. It's all through the data store. Okay, so that's why we never block it. There's something which come up, and I think we need to be, investigate those things. If these kind of scenario, folks see, just keep reporting these things because these are critical ones we need to fix definitely in these things.
I have another use case where the app is trying to push the config to the NDCell, and for some reason, if the config is not applied properly on the device, I mean, it gets applied to the database, but in turn, I mean, there may be another agent in the device is trying to configure based on what you received in the database, and if it fails, then I want to reapply the config from the app, but the config tree already has the same exact.
Yeah, that's where I say, right, this is something application need to take care of. If the switch is not there, they need to clean it up. Once the switch pops up again, you have to do the configuration again, kind of situation.
This scenario, the switch, the connection, there was a connection never got disconnected. So the connection is alive. Something happened on the switch that didn't make the device to apply the config. It could be in the driver or some other module. But everything is same from the top level, from the app to the controller, to the device. All the connections are alive. I just want to reapply the config from the app. So maybe if we can put some kind of a flag where I am just reapplying the config. I mean, even
No,
if
that is something which we don't really want to.
How about a simple RPC that is run through the config?
Well, these are kind of, the tools which we are giving them to kill the southbound itself. So, but that's why we don't really want to do that, because we don't really want it to be contextual. If you say that, config, you send us a config and we send it down to the switch, we don't really want to be aware of the switch, config we are saying. This is a contract we are giving to application. These are the Yang model. You configure it, we'll send it down to the switch and switch should configure it. And we read all the operational data out of it and put into operational data store, okay? So whatever is a switch, we have all the operational data, operational state in operational data store. So application go and need to figure out whether the configuration which I did was really applied or not. If it is not, then they have to kind of, reconfigure this stuff. But the point is, if plugins start doing all those things, there can be a lot of scenarios where, it will die doing this reconciliation per transaction.
But can you, go ahead. I mean, if you can give a knob or flag to say, whatever is in the config, just reapply again.
What about from the NBSAL Yang side?
So that's,
Do a-
and that's exactly we are talking about. I mean, I understand what you're saying since you already advised me that you have done that. Basically, you're saying delete the config, reapply that. You know that works.
Yeah.
So here the question is, what if there's a very simple RPC? Just says, give the device name, and for this device, apply the config tree. I mean, this is not really a happy path. User will not do this. But under these circumstances where that he is against the corner, I mean, basically, that is research condition, is that a viable interface?
Yeah, having RPC is good.
Again,
Yes,
it's
we
not
can
so
probably
RPC
think of it.
directly to the configuring the device.
it's like kind of a reconciliation when you when the controller tries to reconnect with the device.
So that's where I agree that some of these things need to be done. The point is whether they need to be done in RPC way or from a data store. That is something we need to think it. I personally am not much favor of RPCs. Once I work with the clustering and all that, because that's where there's a little bit of problem with RPCs and all those things. You need to handle it in a much better way in a cluster when it comes to the clustering, right? So probably if there is something which we can do from a data store perspective, that is something we can think of. And that definitely is I agree. But, it's like some people always comment on this thing, you deleted it, you applied it again, right? So you will make one call anyways. So it's just that you have to call the rest conf. So there is always a trade-off between these things and we need to kind of take it up. But yeah, this is a good point.
Or how about a medium where you just have like a force, so you don't have to delete it, you can just say, hey, pass this through.
Yeah, that because problem with Southbound plugin is it always kind of interface with the MD cell. Okay, so MD cell notifies us, we can do it. Now the point is MD cell work on a standard REST conf, these interfaces. So yeah, we can either do one thing is we can modify the YAML model in the sense we can provide a flag into it, right? But the point is you set the flag once, then again you have to go through the similar mechanism of deleting it or modifying it, right?
The flag thing for each configuration is really does not.
Yeah, so it's like and that's where the issue is. Now the point is our RPC, you can't really define what all configuration you want to see. You want to see a switch level reconciliation, so we need to provide a flag at a switch level, okay? Which you can probably trigger so that the switch level reconciliation kind of get reconfigured. Yeah.
So it is very thin, it's very light, it's very shim. Everything else transfers it to the rest of the functionality. It is just to tell it do this, but it's not really heavy in terms of.
Now the point is the use cases when it comes, we do the reconciliation. Now the point is if you're asking for explicit reconciliation, right? In my personal opinion, application should not even come to that level. We need a very simple contract. If the switch is connected, you apply config in a config data store, then it should be applied on a switch. That is our job. Now the point is if the switch itself don't support some of these things, you can't really do it even you apply 10 times or 20 times, right? So that is a kind of interface we want to provide. Say whatever in a config, we make sure that's going to be on a switch until unless switch itself is not functioning properly. That's the simple contract we want to provide. But if you provide flags and all those things, then application will start applying their own mind, and that probably will conflict with the reconciliation we want to do, right? So let's come up with, we wanted to come up with those contracts. If those are not clear enough and still we see a scenarios where we need these kind of flag, we always can entertain it. Yeah.
The way you're describing is a cleaner interface, so
Yeah.
we don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
We are describing just a flag for entry.
Yeah, because if you start application need to worry about Southbound plugin, then it's like there are multiple Southbound plugin, right? You can't really keep writing application where every notch you have to kind of handle.
You're not looking for different contracts with different applications, right?
No, it's a simple contract.
Just a simple contract, yeah.
Multiple contracts, no. We kind of burned by that in the past, so we don't really want to do that.
Oh, no, stay, keep it.
Next is
Got all yours together.
Oh. That's a beast. So what did I wrote here? So what is happening in a NetVirt clustering is when we started it, a while back, the one problem we have seen is we are kind of internally using a lot of caches. For if you run the NetVirt in one single node, there are a lot of internal caches which we use kind of to have some temporary state which we use to execute the business logic. Now the point is, as far as your config is in kind of data store, it's replicated to all the 3 instances in the clustering mode. But when you have internal caches, we don't really have any way to kind of replicate those caches, from one node to another nodes, okay? And that's where the problem is. The problem comes, things will work fine if none of the controller goes down. Because caches are building and all those things happening, but if some controller goes down, then if cache is not appropriately built in the second one, everything start go haywire. So that was one of the problems. So initially the idea was we'll keep one NetVirt instance as a master instance, and that's going to do all the configuration for you. But because of the caches and some other limitations, what we did is, as of now, all the 3 instances kind of execute the same control flow, okay? And they kind of recreate all the caches internally in the same way, okay? the thing which we did is probably you can call is not really a final solution kind of. It's the first cut we did. What we do is we hold the instances at the time when they write into data store. Okay. So who writes through a data store? So we selected that one application is going to write to data store. That's the point of conflict for us. Okay. And that's where these applications kind of do the election and choose one application, and that application actually write to a data store. So that is what we did, right? But the point is, we see there are a lot of corner cases where these things can fail because we don't really want to have internal caches, because one controller goes down, we want to bring it up, although it can rebuild the caches, but it's not efficient enough because it depends on the data store, what data is there, right? So, and we don't really know when to kind of do this reconciliation because customers come up and then you have to wait for applying the replication and all those things. But if the transaction is already going on, you can't really rebuild that cache up to that state. Okay, so there is always error conditions you can hit. So what we want to do is we want to avoid these internal caches, but there is still scenarios where we can't totally get rid of these things because we are relying on two type of event. One is from northbound, one is from a southbound. Okay, so you need to kind of have some mechanism where you can kind of relate it, and the ordering is not really deterministic. You can get northbound event first and the southbound later, or southbound first, northbound later, right? So we need to do some reconciliation there. That's why we kind of use some transient caches there. And the problem with the current code, these transient caches is kind of spread across the code. So we just wanted to put it in a way where all the code is kind of at a one place where actually cache management happens, and it is very minimal. So this is kind of effort we are planning to do in this release related to NetVirt clustering. So hopefully once we kind of get rid of all the caches and we can successfully kind of safely repopulate all these caches, then probably we'll go for a model where one NetVirt instance is going to work at a time.
So I think that the NetVirt, centralized NetVirt model,
Yeah.
That will help.
solves
Yeah.
the problem, 'cause
Yeah.
all the information you need, it just needs to be in the
Yep.
model.
Model,
And
yeah.
Exactly.
it goes
That's-
synchronized with it.
So we never had this NetVirt model before, right? That's where we are kind of keeping those caches because we need to put some data up there. And now we have a model, so these caches will go away now.
So for each module, there is a clustering mechanism. So for example, the NP cell, there's a cluster mechanism and network. So each feature has to be
Cluster aware. Yeah.
But it's fairly simple, though. It's most of it's who's going to be the master. Like there's a selection process that goes on, and
So application who actually don't handle the devices, then it's very simple process unless you manage these caches. If you don't really have a caches, one of the application can be master, it can write to the data store, right? That's a very simple problem. So this clustering goes more complex when you come to the southbound side where you're kind of handling the devices. You start handling the devices, that's where the complexity comes into picture. Because we want all the controller to be running in active mode. We don't really want all the devices to be managed by one controller. We want, set of devices managed by separate controllers. That's where we kind of say that, clustering is going to give us a scalability aspect of it, right?
So is it, scalability in terms of the load balancing or high availability? What is the...
It does both. That's the beauty of what clustering we have as of now. It provides you HA. So what happens is assume you have 9 devices and 3 devices is connected to each of the controller. Okay. If the controller 1 goes down, these 3 devices will be distributed among 2 of the remaining controllers. Okay. So you got the HA. You also have a scaling also, and you get performance because you kind of each controller is handling minimum devices now.
So the southbound plugin is today is clustered aware?
Yeah. So NetVirt used 2 southbound plugin. One is OpenFlow plugin, and the second is southbound OVSDB southbound plugin, and both are cluster aware. That's why the NetVirt is working. If both of them, one of them is not cluster aware, NetVirt is not going to work.
All right. One more.
Still me?
Yeah.
So there are a lot of, one of the use cases we think of, what if the whole cluster goes down, it want to come back up? Right? As an extreme case we are thinking of, but this is something eventually will come up, right? As far as in a cluster mode, one of your controller is running, you are happy. But once the 2 controller goes down, you kind of get into a singleton cluster mode, and that never going to work, so you have to reboot your cluster. In that case, how we can kind of reconcile it, given that most of the configuration is already available in the config data store. So you have a network, subnet, and everything into it, right? So that requires some extensive reconciliation because then NetVirt need to be aware of the ordering, the hierarchy between the resources like network, subnet, port, security group and all those things, and they need to kind of do, ordering, internal ordering, and then they need to realize whether the configuration is there in a config data store or not, right? So with the current implementation, once we kind of made this reconciliation in the OVSDB and OpenFlow plugin work, the OpenFlow plugin pretty much does the reconciliation, that work is done. Southbound plugin, there are few of the stuff which we need to fix. Once that is done, so if these plugins can take care of their configuration, then NetVirt has a less burden. It just need to reconcile what all components or what all flows and bridges are connected or not. It need to verify it. Whatever the missing part is, that is need to be done. But still is a big task which we are planning to do it, so that it will give you the full cluster reboot reconciliation, so that if you go down, you start it again and you have your network availability and everything working fine. So that's another task we are planning to do in this release. Yeah, so that's where we are saying the Southbound plugins, right? They will basically take care of that reconciliation, because for each of these configuration, there are two actions happen basically. From OVSDB Southbound plugin is the configuration of the device. It's basically creating a BRINT, BREX, and they are attaching it them, right? The second thing is from OpenFlow plugin. OpenFlow plugin basically install flows on those switches, right? So in this, we are definitely taking a certain assumption that your controller is gone down. It does not really mean that you go and delete all the bridges on the node. That's not going to be supported with this thing, because that even is a bigger problem. We are assuming your network is fine, controller went down. When you come back up, your OVSDB will take care of all the configuration that is there, and the OpenFlow plugin will take care of the configuration that is that NetVirt already put in OpenFlow plugin config data store. So they will take care of their configuration. Now, that's why it's a simple problem for NetVirt to fix it, right? Otherwise, NetVirt can't really go to each devices and see whether the configuration is there or not. Okay. So yeah, this is one of the biggest tasks which we need to kind of take care of this release. So anybody interested, just reach out to me, Sam, and we are happy to take any contribution anybody wants to do.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Anil.
Yeah, that's about it.
No. That's enough to keep it going. Okay, IPv6. How much do we want to talk? Or where's Manish? Are we going to have a session tomorrow, do you think? Or still? Okay. Okay, so you do want to cover them? Okay, so yeah, so we'll just, so IPv6, there's a lot of other, NetVirt today only supports really IPv or v4. But we've had projects going forward that Manish has been driving to try to get IPv6 support in. And these are kind of the list of features we're kind of looking at to try to get supported. And again, there'll be a session tomorrow. They'll go in further detail on that. The L3 feature gaps. Saku in here? So Saku covered a lot of this morning. I don't know if you want to talk any more about it or just go. There you go. Yeah.
So there are several feature gaps, and in order to fill those gaps, I think neutron side needs to be done somehow. So only I'd like to do in NetVirt side, not only OpenStack and OpenStack networking ODL and neutron northbound side, and I'd like to address in NetVirt side. Yeah. So that I can confirm all functionality work from through OpenStack to OpenDaylight.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Saku. Oh, node role report. Well. Yeah, all right.
Right now, port binding and related functionality does work with OpenDaylight. So I'd like to make it work with OpenStack modification. Yeah, again from OpenStack to networking ODL, neutron northbound and network.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. Can we go back to that one? So, I just want to make sure I understand this. The basic idea here is to stick the OpenStack nodes into the empty cell.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And they come in by a northbound.
No. Southbound needs to import which what capability is supported by this node. So Southbound needs to import all the information up to it. Up.
Yeah, is Eric in here?
Uh,
I think it's like a case like Eric, like the DPDK support, right? There's, for Nova to schedule things, it needed to know that it was a DPDK port.
Because I
You know,
understand, I'm just-
if,
where's the notification? If I bring up a new compute node.
Yeah, in that.
Right now, I learn about, I know that there's research
Mhm.
group talking to me
Mhm.
about NetVirt, but where, this is something beyond that.
Yeah, right. So at this point, there is no notification from OpenDaylight to Neutron. So at this point, we have to resort to use polling by Neutron. Yeah. At some point, I'd like to have notification, and then we'd like to optimize such notification.
Okay, and that's for the purpose of getting these capabilities.
Yeah. And also, such notification can be used to report error in, for example, in OpenVSDB or compute node.
So OVS, the OVS would say, I'm on a DPDK node. And report that up via OVSDB.
Yeah, and then OpenDaylight tells the Neutron. And then OpenStack scheduler can use those information for smart scheduling.
That would need a schema update, right?
Yeah, we need to introduce new young model.
Nova would have some of that host-related information would be in Nova, and you can populate that from Nova to Neutron, pass it as part of the Neutron code binding to ODS.
No, actually, yeah. Nova does, at this point, Nova doesn't know about network side. Just Nova maintains a computer node. Nova should not know about networking elements. Yeah. And for example, OVS should be maintained by Neutron, dedicatedly. And when Nova needs information, Nova asks Neutron what capability is available.
What about like SRIOV NIC? Right?
Yeah, in that case.
Compute has an SRIOV NIC and there's no switch. How does that move?
Yeah. In that case, when SRIOV is enabled and the user asks for it, Nova asks Neutron and asks Neutron necessary information. And actually, Neutron asks the L2 agent on the computer node, and then it returns back necessary information eventually to Nova. And then actually, related information is passed to libvirt. Yeah, I can discuss details later.
Hardware VTEP? Who wants that one? It's Daya.
Yeah, so for Beryllium, we added the plugin. We've added the config as well as operational mechanisms needed for supporting the hardware VTEP schema. And the plugin is in place. So we need, which supports this 1.3 version of the schema. So it needs some amount of renderer architecture for the glue code, which basically will translate all the L2 gateway API into the plugin code. So the logic is a work in progress. We are still targeting it for SR1 or SR2, but let's see how it goes. The next steps would be, to finish this logic for L2 gateway to plugin mapping. Complete the L2 gateway ODL driver code. There's still some components there that are a work in progress. The CSIT for the hardware VTEP Southbound plugin, we need to expand some of the test cases there. UTs and ITs, of course. And next for boron, mostly it's this last part that we want to target, which is adding the 1.4 version of the schema, which will have L3, DVR support that will be extend over to these devices, as well as ACL. These L3 ACLs have all been added in the newer version of the schema, so we want to be able to support those tables and also have the northbound orchestration in place for it, as well as statistics. So that's about it.
Thanks, Dan. Okay. Optimizations for VTEPs and flows. Yeah, so what that's talking about is right now, NetVirt pretty much it builds a VTEP niche. It connects all the hosts with the VXLAN. So there's a VTEP for every host to host. There's a there's a tunnel and a VTEP on each one. We've been trying to do that for the last release. I think even for 2 releases, trying to change that to go flow-based, where you just have a single VTEP and you're just pushing flows to direct traffic through the tunnels. That's just something that kind of helps us, makes our pipeline a little bit easier to use. Flow programming batching. That one, right now, flows, they're programmed one at a time. And it's a write to MD-SAL. And we go on, go to the next flow, write to MD-SAL. Some other projects have said that they've been able to batch those flow programming into groups and then push them down all in one batch. So that's something we're looking at. I haven't ever seen real numbers on it yet, but supposedly more efficient. But regardless, the way our code, it helps us too. The way our code is right now, the way these flow programming is kind of spread out. So this will kind of help us get into a refactoring anyways to put this all in one class anyway. So it's something we kind of want to do anyways.
So does the network currently support even the GRE tunneling, just VXLANs, or only VXLANs?
The OVSDB side will do it, but NetVirt will only set up, it'll set them up. So NetVirt will set up, if you give a neutron, if you pass in the neutron and create a GRE tunnel, it will set it up. A lot of our use cases, though, are all built around VXLAN, like SFC and things like that. So, but you can get the GRE tunnels if you're just doing basic neutron, networking. So, but it'll take GRE. Yeah, so yeah, definitely on the OVSDB side, it'll definitely. Yeah. Service function chaining. Main thing there's been a few model changes to the service function chaining, and we've got to incorporate those. The next big one is VNFM, which is kind of a way. Right now, service chaining is you have to create your service functions before you can actually create your service chain in order to build that. But the VNFM will make it a little more dynamic. So the service functions can come and go, and so it's not so tied to a predetermined chain. SFC into the NetVirt architecture, it's kind of bolted on right now, but it'll blend in a little bit more into the NetVirt architecture. And the last points, Andre, when do you think this NSH patch, what's it looking like for the NSH? Is it going to make it for boron? Oh, it's. Yeah, that's what I said.
It's all upstream OVS. Well, kernel work, Linux kernel, and then OVS. So I think in this time frame, I fully expect there to be code that we could use. Whether it's, it's best case is it's in OVS 2.6 on the OVS side.
Best case. That's a really aggressive case. Yeah.
Best case.
Yeah.
We're supposed to get into 2.5. Now we're talking 2.6.
Wow. It's still.
I mean, I'm not
Yeah, like Andre said, there's a lot of moving pieces.
I think that in this time frame, we'll have code that works, whether everything is upstream, committed, and release. In that time frame, probably, I don't know.
2.5 is something which I heard. 2.6 is no one might hear about it.
Yeah.
And when is 2.6, by the way?
Oh, I don't think.
Yeah, that's why I just made a joke. I was like,
2.5 just came out.
So, but the the history if I didn't explain that though. So right now, pretty much when you're using SFC and you're using NSH, it's using a patch that's like at least 2 years old. It's never been upstream, but it's pretty much all the implementations. That's what we use right now. So we really, it kind of limits what we can do with the chains and the way we program the flows. So we really want to get the upstream proper NSH support. And then I've got support for NSH proxy. Do you know how far, I don't know if the Intel guys, do you know how far that's gone through? So that's, yeah.
How far is that through?
NSH proxy? Yeah, that's what I figured.
Plans for that now for Boron.
Yeah, there's plans, so, yeah. So that's why I've got it there, you know, based on availability. However much comes into the SFC project, you know, if we can figure out
There's one available based on
the Python. Yeah,
more robust solution for Boron.
yeah. So, and the last bullet point on that one is just OPNFV integration. You know, that's the big use case for OPNFV. They use OpenDaylight. They use service function chaining. So there's probably work there to be pulled through. It's that too, but it's plus the solution, right? I mean, what do they have right now? I mean, that's.
Yeah, we just hit the OpenDaylight Brahmaputra release Thursday last week. So SFC is mostly in, but the next step is I think they call SR1, which is end of March. And we have everything basically working, but we just didn't get it all automated and all that. So hopefully by the end of March, have it all automated with these yardstick test cases and everything.
Yeah.
It's working.
Yeah.
Yeah, talk about a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah. Yeah, it's using Thapar right now. CSIT, JMO in here? No? Oh. CSIT stuff, OVSDB and NetVirt in general, there's a lot, you know, anybody that's played with OpenStack knows it's pretty tough. And throwing OpenDaylight into the mix makes it even more difficult. So CSIT jobs, there's some jobs out there right now. They kind of test out basic OVSDB functionality, a little bit of NetVirt functionality. We need to beef up those tests. JMO's got a session tomorrow, actually. I don't have an asterisk though. But he'll have a session that we were trying to make these tests a little more better, a little more, cover a lot more. Especially on the OpenStack side. We've got Tempest tests that run. We've got some basic integration tests that run. But we'd really like to do multi-node tests with OpenStack and enable more of the L3 services so we can get more use cases. Marcus is in here, but so Marcus will be talking tomorrow too. He's got a scaling. That's something I think everybody keeps asking about, OVSDB scaling performance numbers. So Marcus will have a session tomorrow. So hopefully we'll have some real good numbers there, you know, or at least the start on getting it figured out. Do you want to say anything now about it or just tomorrow?
I would just say that we've been working on it for a relatively straightforward test for OVSDB and NetVirt. It's been a while now. I think we're pretty close to getting to a place where we can have them up and running regularly. But the goals of the scale and performance and stability side, they're not completely aligned with CSIT sort of testing because, in large part, the ones that are upstream are just going to be focused on regression, whether or not things go back. But the goal is that you can pull those tests down, run them on real hardware, and get some real numbers from those tests, and then you can have a report on an ongoing basis of what's actually happening what's happening in the network and so on. So I guess that's all I'd say. There's a lot of tests that we'd like to run. We have too many people working in the space, so it helps run more. But yeah, that's kind of sort of what I'm looking at right now.
Okay. Steve, do you want to talk?
This
this stuff isn't actually specific to OVSDB. We could do it in any project, but I'm doing it in OVSDB. So I noticed that when you do refactoring work, it's nice to have integration tests because they're supposed to be a safety net, except that the tests that we have aren't. They're intimately tied to the implementation, and whenever you change code, you need to change the unit test as well. So they're basically rubbish. That was the second part. The integration tests that we have in OVSDB, they're okay, but we need more of them. So the unit tests, as I was saying, are pretty bad, and we end up using lots of power mock, which also means that our code coverage metrics are incorrect. And so what I want to do is make sure that we test the unit test the public APIs and not the private stuff. Take the time to build up meaningful data sets, because there's actually pretty nifty features in controller for doing MDSAL-based tests. And enable fearless refactoring. So once we get solid unit tests, we can make sure that changes don't change what the public APIs are supposed to do. And the next one's still me as well.
Oh, is it? Well, but this is another, at least for the OpenDaylight community, this is something, like Stephen's saying, it's not really OVSDB and NetVirt. This is probably across the whole OpenDaylight. It takes like Java experts to get this stuff right. So we're trying to get some good example tests in place that, for the other projects that they can use as examples. So it's a good place to be.
Yeah, and the reason I want to do this as well is that you see, as like Sam was saying, OVSDB is the kind of project where we get new contributors quite regularly. And contributors write unit tests, and the way they write unit tests very often is to look at the way unit tests are written in the rest of the project and imitate that. And if the unit tests are bad, then they, like gremlins, they replicate.
This is something which you face in open plugin project. So if you're kind of done with it, have more bandwidth.
Not yet.
No, the idea is for me to explain how it's done, and then other people can do it everywhere else. And I'm planning on proposing a tutorial session at the September summit on unit testing.
Yeah. Oh wait.
No, it's not me.
It's not you then. There you go.
All right. Okay, so technical debt. So this is stuff, some of it's driven by changes to offset zero projects. So if you were in the clustering data store session, this was mentioned briefly. For the MDSAL, we're supposed to switch from data change listener to data tree change listener because it reduces the amount of work that the change notification layers have to do. And you get nice clustering support with that as well. Then non-blocking MDSAL operations. So this is a bunch of to-dos that are in the code since the ADSAL to MDSAL transition. Basically, all of MDSAL is asynchronous, but in OVSDB, whenever we touch MDSAL, we wait for the result of the transaction straight away. It's not entirely trivial to switch to an event-based system where we just fire off things to the MDSAL and then react to changes as they're done, but I'd like to get that started at least. And then this part, I think, could be very interesting as well. In OVSDB, we have a tendency to do one transaction per operation, which means that when something goes wrong, you only roll back the last operation that you did, and you could end up with senseless setups in config and then on your switches, or an operational when you're bringing the data back up. If we can get coherent sets of changes from from a functional perspective into a single transaction and send that in one shot, it will be faster in the MDSAL, and if something goes wrong, we can roll back the whole transaction. But making it asynchronous makes it harder to test, which loops back to my previous slide about unit testing. Transaction chains, so this is the transaction invoker and other stuff as well. So basically we need to figure out how we want to handle all that. And finally, Java 8. So for Boron, we're using Java 8 only, which means we can use all the cool new features in Java 8. But obviously, also using cool new features only works if the code stays readable for everybody. So that all depends on what people feel comfortable with. Eclipse and IntelliJ and so on, they'll help you, the IDEs will help you convert code to Lambdas, and it tends to stay reasonably readable, but if you go full out for a functional approach, you can also write very nice code, but that people coming from a C background or a Java background, old style Java background, might find hard to read, and that raises the bar for contributions, which isn't ideal.
Can you expand on the non-blocking and detail operations? Can you do some examples now?
Non-blocking, so
So whenever you write the data structure,
yeah.
you can basically reference a future, right? So the future gives you, it's all based on Java library, it gives you one method file which you can set or get or something.
Yeah, you just get it.
Lets you do it synchronously. So in other way you can call method where you can provide a fallback.
Sure.
Yeah. Usually do anonymous function and then that will take it off.
Yeah.
That's what
Either that, or you sort of take an agenda approach where you keep all the futures that are returned, and then later on at some point
So
get them.
Is it in the context of the OVSDB library, or is it outside of it?
This is all MDCell.
So only one transaction at a time today. So
Yeah, well, the only one.
Transaction is multiple. It's just that the transaction which we are actually doing, we are waiting for the transaction to finish and come back, rather than having a feature call which actually get called back whenever the transaction finishes, right?
Right.
That get call is there. That is to a data store. Yeah, so that is kind of a blocking call. And that is not from a, I think OVSDB is moreover in a network which we do. So we write a lot of things into OVSDB, we write into OpenFlow plugin. And both of these are basically kind of synchronous as of now. So we are kind of locked on that. Okay. And whatever transaction we do, we say .get, and if we wait for that to finish, and then you'll get a result to you, right? That is something which we want to get away with. The problem with that, those of these blocking transaction is because some of these transactions happen in action to the event you are getting from it, data store itself. Okay, and that's where this blocking actually make your things more worse. Okay, so that's where we want to go asynchronous so that we don't really wait or block on that thought of writing something into data store.
especially in cluster data storage.
I mean, if I take an example, let's say if I try to configure a bridge, so I go and write the config to the config tree, and immediately I try to create a second bridge. So based on this model, I mean, unless I finish the first transaction, which is creating the first bridge, so I can't really proceed with the second.
No, that you can do. That is a Southbound thing. That is different stuff, right?
Yeah.
You write directly to a data store, and then Southbound actually listen it and send the configuration down to the switch.
Sure.
Okay? That is not blocking anywhere. It's all about writing to the data store, which application was running within the controller actually write to a data store.
Oh, it's between the application to the company.
Yeah.
Simpler ones like OpenFlow, the rules. When we write to NBCell, we write those rules. And we wait, though, for that transaction to finish. Then we go write the next rule. Whereas we could just write them all and then just wait for the callbacks. You know.
So
But if
so
there's
the one,
errors, you have to do rollback.
That you have to anyway take care of. You have to take care of in both the cases, right? Whether it's blocking or non-blocking, right? So whatever action needs to be done, that you have to. It's just like change a little bit of a control.
optimization. So submit multiple operations in a single transaction. Is it like calling multiple things and then call a transaction or submit and then what?
Yeah.
And the other one is a transaction change. What's the actual difference between the transaction change and the other one?
What did you mean by transaction? Well, I always think of the transaction invoker for this stuff, but I'm not sure that's what Sam had in mind.
I was thinking of the transaction chains.
So these are the new way we write. Right? As of now, we use transaction read, write, on the read only, write only.
Yeah.
So now we have a new classes which say transaction chaining.
Yeah.
That transaction chaining basically provide you whenever that chain fails, it actually notifies you back to find out who are any of these transactions. It will give you a transaction ID that this is the transaction you try to do, and these were the transactions you put in. It gives you an opportunity to kind of revert your transactions. Okay. and you bunch your transition into it, and that's where it has a efficient implementation internally to data store. So that's why it's efficient, and it gives you more flexibility in terms to handle any of the transition tables.
So let's say if I want to create 3 bridges, I can basically group those.
And you can write it.
Could.
One of them fails, you're going to roll back all the 3.
Yeah, that is all in terms of data store. So
Yeah.
When you're talking, I want to create an device, that is a different stuff.
And you can.
Rollbacks will also have different contracts, right? Whether you want a full rollback or partial is okay or not.
Yeah.
Depends on the transaction.
So in that case, I mean, the data can be inconsistent because, I mean, you might have executed a transaction on the device, but still.
So it's all about committing, right? So once you commit, then data goes down into right?
Yeah.
But
So it depends on what you want to do. You might say I want all 3 bridges or none. So then you stick that in a single transaction, and if something goes wrong, all 3 will be rolled back. But you could also not care but want them to be sent off to the MD cell as quickly as possible, and then you'd stick 3 transactions in chains, send it off, and then the MD cell would tell you what happened once it happened. So you'd know if one of them failed, which one it was, and you could fix it. But you'd still be asynchronous and submitting everything as quickly as possible.
So the data change listener listening to the config tree will not really push the transaction down to the device unless this is all committed.
Well,
So-
that depends on
Yeah.
the fact bounds.
Comes after committing. Once it's committed to data store, then Southbound will listen to that and it will take actions down to it, right? It's all about talking to data store, writing to the data store. Southbound configuration comes after that.
Thanks. So I think we've kind of pushed time. So I'll just talk through quickly then so we can get out. Quas-Q stuff, Eric implemented this, but I think there was a couple changes. It was just kind of difficult. He had to create certain, he had to write to a certain OVSDB before he could get certain data back to write the rest of the Quas model, right? So I think.
I think we had some question related to QoS.
Yeah, we did a trip though, in the hallway.
You already have?
Okay. Yeah. So that's about the Quas stuff. So there's changes there because Eric implemented that for the Beryllium release, and I think is InnoSab guys here. Okay. Oh yeah, Rashmi. So you guys are using the Quas-Q stuff. Okay. VLAN aware VMs. Do you want to talk to it? Oh, we lost that one, Eric.
So the idea of doing this QoS support in the Southbound is so that you could use an application run towards their application, but the idea was to support the OpenStack QoS.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. VLAN aware.
VLAN aware VMs, I believe. So Asaka was explaining these 2 features to me last week. I think these are basically OpenStack features that I've been getting from our OpenStack team. VLAN aware VMs, I guess, you might have VLAN or a VM that wants to support multiple VMs. And I think the idea of this one is you just want one port with multiple VMs on it. So as I understand it, basically the idea
Thanks, Eric. Auto attach. Rashmi, you want to talk about that? Oh, come up. There you go.
So, can you hear me? Okay. So OVS 240 came up with a new table called auto attach. Basically, this was to enable OVS take benefits of shortest path bridging networks. So that meant support for ODL, support for it in ODL had to be done. So can we?
Oh, yeah. Go.
So there are two aspects to it. One is LLDP support, and which is a column to interface table, and the auto touch table in itself, which is also a column to the bridge table. So the current support in OVS for this, it does not have external IDs column supported in the auto attach table. So configuring this table from ODL cannot be supported until they implement it. So that part is to do item. Of course, the rest of the implementation for syncing the ODL with table updates is done. Yeah, the to do items are once OVS supports these external IDs column for the auto attach table, rework the code in OVSDB to be able to configure it, and of course integration test and some unit test is remaining, along with documentation and postman collection. That's it.
Thanks. Okay, cool. So more information if you want to, our main project, is right there, the OVSDB project. We have the weekly meetings Tuesday, 10 o'clock PST time. And as you saw, a lot of people involved, and a lot of these people, they're brand new to the project, but they're able to come in and, drive features. So anybody that wants to help out, and be involved, if there's any areas that you're kind of interested in, feel free to reach out to somebody, and be a part of OpenDaylight. So, all right.
How often OVSDB syncs up to the controller or main line or main?
What do you mean?
It's about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
We had to work, out of master branch. It's everything in the master branch. The controller
Yeah.
is controller also has a master branch. Okay, we also work for master branch. It's all the same deal. We don't really have
Yeah,
that.
it's all the same. Yeah. So, okay.
We don't really work with stable version of a controller on top. We are not on that mode as of now. It's all about, everything in the master branch.
So, okay, all right. Oh,
Just code based or like can have some DHCP code point based or any other based on some classifiers?
for
The QoS.
Quas? Eric?
Alex, there is a question for you.
Praveen, tap him.
QoS. You can configure QoS on the ports, or you can do it based on a DHCP code points or any other packet classifier.
Yeah, so what I did for the Beryllium was support for the QoS table in OVSDB, so we that pretty much gets associated with the port. Yeah, that's a port based.
Port based.
Yeah.
To create a QoS for all the packets. I think depending on, if you have some Linux, HSGB, or that or in there, one of those QoS types has the DHCP step or has to be used. I also understand that there's some things that also
Okay, all right. Thanks, guys.